Hello, I'm Diane St. Germain, and I am a watercolor artist and teacher, and I live on the North Shore of Lake Pontchartrain in Slidell, Louisiana. And I just really enjoy plein air painting, that is, painting on location. But I can't always do that, like right now when we're isolated because of this coronavirus. So I'm going to be working from a photograph. So here is the photograph that I used to paint the painting, and I want to be careful about reproducing a photograph. That's not what what I think an artist should do. I want to interpret it, translate it, tell you what most grabbed me in this scene. And number one, the scene means a lot to me because that group of housing in the back is North Shore Beach subdivision where Marty and I raised our two children, Scott and Christy, from 1976 to 2001. And specifically with this view, it is so beautiful with the contrast between the sky and the water being a light value and the darker value of the marsh scene with that group of houses connected to the piers there. It just and I wanted to grab that contrast in my painting. Here is a photo of my completed painting, and you can see that I did capture a strong contrast between the light values in the sky and their reflection on that small pool of water in the back and in the larger body of water in the front. And then I'd just like to conclude on evaluating this study to say that I was very focused on the back houses, group of houses, seeing them as a group, and as they went to the left, the structure of the piers. So I wanted to give a really strong backlit form back there. To get started, I'd like to just explain, first of all, why I used such a small palette. I'm used to a bigger one when in my home studio, and this one I usually mainly use on painting on location. It's lightweight, small, but it fit well into the picture frame of what I was painting, so you could see the paints as I used them. And all the paints are named in this, and you'll see it again at the end of the video for your help. And you'll notice when I'm painting, I will be using mainly red, yellow, and blue, a triad, keeping it as simple as I can. To start, I show these tapes. One's simple masking tape on the left, each an inch wide, and the one on the right is my preferred artist tape. A little bit more expensive, but well worth it because it does not tend to come up quick from the board. The board I use is a gator board. The size of this paper is 11 by 14, but you can use whatever size you wish. But I just simply overlap the tape about a quarter of an inch all around the paper and make that secure so that I can begin the painting process. The rest of these video clips will be video and not stills. So, and I'm going a little fast forward so that it won't take 2 hours for me to finish this painting for you. You'll see that I always start with in landscape with horizon, and I try to put the horizon up in the make it a high horizon or a low horizon, and never right in the middle because that's boring. And you'll see I'm treating the houses as a grouping. Here I am pre-wetting the paper, the watercolor paper. This paper is 140-pound Saunders. I like Saunders, and I also like Arches paper, and I have that information at the end of this video. I am wetting it with a sea sponge, and I want to make absolutely sure that I get every spot of dry paper wet with the same wetness throughout. And now I'm just drying, taking off the excess water off the tape on the edges so that it won't bleed back into the painting and give me moisture when I don't want it. This brush that I'm starting with is a mop or quill brush, and I have that, it's a synthetic squirrel brush and holds a lot of water, so this is great in this beginning underpainting where I have the paper wet and I am adding watery mixtures of red, yellow, and blue. This blue right now is cobalt blue, and the yellow is yellow ochre, and the red is permanent alizarin crimson. And notice I'm not using just the tip of the brush, I'm using the whole brush. And I go back in and I put more paint on and really load the whole brush, not just the tip. This is really important. And I just really want to keep some of the light areas to show at the very end. So here's where you might want to isolate some whites, a white of the paper, which I don't think I really did in this picture. And also you want to do this rather quickly because you want to keep this as moist as possible and don't overwork. Here I'm adding a little ultramarine blue because I really want it to be a darker underpainting as I get where the sky meets the horizon, to really let it just have a strong contrast of light and middle value. And notice that I clean my palette often because this palette does not have a lot of area for me to work with and lay out my wash in that area, my colors. So when I sense that I'm getting too much water in my mixture, or I'm not able to control the water to paint ratio in my brush, I will clear it off. I'll have a Kleenex ready to just clean it off. And I've been noticing that I'm going a little bit horizontal a lot here, so I just change my strokes a little bit. And this is just an underpainting, and some of this will just definitely be, this next layer will go over this, but it's so nice to have it soft and unifies the whole painting to have this nice underpainting. Now here it was getting a little bit dry in my right lower corner, so I spritzed it a little bit with this Derwent spritzer. And I'm also taking a smaller quill brush here so that I have a little bit more control in this bottom area and not adding too much water. I've got to feel the water to pigment ratio. I did spritz this area, and now I'm going in there with a little bit more paint on my paintbrush so that I can get this to be soft in this front section of my Marsh. This board is at a little bit of about a 15-degree angle, which helps to let the paint and water flow down to the bottom, and watercolor can really do its wonderful merging and I don't know, just making these gorgeous washes on its own, and I don't have to push it and make it happen. So I'm nearing the end here, and I know I have to get out and stop. And I'm watching right now. I'm watching the amount of moisture that is collecting at the bottom of the painting, and I will get in there and before I stop and let it dry, I will pick up with what they call a thirsty brush. I'll dry my brush pretty much and then get down on that bottom and just kind of lick it up. And that's what I'm doing right now, is just trying to watch my edges. And sometimes I even take some paper. Right now I'm pulling it away so that it'll all start moving around and merging together in a way that nothing but watercolor can do. It's just wonderful. I love this when it happens. So here it's totally dry, and I'm putting a piece of paper on top so that I can show you that at this point, I'm going to make sure I'm not going to spill any of this on top of my painting. So I have clean water, and I have a sponge that I use to help me control the water to paint mixture. That is a moist sponge. If it's totally dry, you're in trouble. You're not going to absorb anything. Here I am starting putting in the paint by the horizon. You will notice here that I am taking thicker paint, and basically the reason for this is that I am in the second stage of painting, where I'm putting in the mid values. And because my intention was to have a strong contrast between the marsh and the sky, I am starting very dark, a very dark value in some areas. I do vary it, but I want that contrast. And as I come forward, I will start to lighten up a little bit. Here, the colors, the pigments that I am using are the same, basically a red, yellow, and blue. The blue is now a little bit darker with the ultramarine blue in that top left corner of my palette. And down at the bottom, there is a gray that I'm using, that I'm mixing with a gold color for my yellow. That gray down at the bottom is called Payne's Gray, and it has a lot of blue in it. So even though I'm not using the same named red, yellow, and blue pigments in this second stage of going darker, I'm still a red, yellow, and blue triad of pigment. And you'll see that I'm very conscious of the bottom line of paint, wet paint, that is going there. I'm softening it as I go, because I don't want it to dry hard and then I can't stop. So I think at this point I'm just trying to decide. Yes, I'm going into the painting the grouping of the houses. So that's why I softened the bottom of the marsh area, so I had time to go into that grouping in the back. Notice how I'm not being picky about this house, that house, trees. It's just a silhouette. And I'm basically using that Payne's Gray, which is, like I said, had that blue in it, and permanent alizarin crimson is the red, and sometimes even ultramarine blue, and the gold. Now, I don't think I put that much gold because it's way in the distance. Now I'm using a different brush, and this is a favorite of mine to get really small detail. And I have this brush in the back for your information, but basically it is a Lowell Cornell 7020 Ultra Round series. And I think this one is a 12. But you can see I have a nice point on it, and so I'm able to get a lot of control here. I use the Kleenex to blot a little bit if I want to have a lost and found edge. And so I have that, I'm holding that. And notice I have that piece of paper there. That's because I have so much paint in the area below, and I just really don't want to put my hand in there at this time, since I'm working up in the upper part of the painting. I'm very conscious of the amount of water to pigment in my little area there for mixing, and I am aware of how much water is on my brush. I have a sponge that I keep handy that I'll touch if I have excess water on my brush at this point, because I really want to get pigment at this point onto the paper. So it's a little bit thicker than that last underpainting stage. And I'm continuing to use the Payne's Gray. You'll see me dip into the Payne's Gray down at the bottom, middle, a lot more, and the gold, which is a quinacridone gold that is right below the yellow ochre. And the Payne's Gray and the yellow ochre are gorgeous together to make greens. And if it gets too green on me, I just add a little bit of red, takes it down. Now I'm going into the cerulean blue, and sometimes even dip into the little turquoise over to the right, but mostly the cerulean blue I think I used here, and making a little bit brighter type of green as I come forward to bring the whole, give the painting a lot of depth. As you can see right now, the horizon and everything on the horizon seems to be being pushed back because I'm putting some brighter colors. Just varying the placing how I place the paint on the surface of it, and try to mix on my paper rather than only mix on my palette. And this brush that I'm using, I absolutely love and use it at this stage a lot, as you can tell. And it is a Escoda brush. It's a synthetic called Escoda Perla, a round, and it's number 16. And I have that also in my brush list at the end of this video. Now I'm coming forward, and this is the tricky part, trying to get that group of weeds on, in the foreground on the left side, and then I'll be doing the right side. And I'm also trying to get where the edge meets the water, and I'm working it up so that eventually I'm going to get it very dark against there to give a nice contrast. And now I'm just kind of working the mass shape of the foreground foliage here. And you'll notice that the edge tells the story. It's not really so much what's inside of the shape, but we know it has some weed areas to it because of the edge of the shape against the beautiful color of the water. Just no rhyme or reason, really. Just get some paint in there right now, changing it, varying it. If I find I'm getting too much blue-green, I'll put some red in it. And again, simply using the triad of red, yellow, and blue. When this dries, part of this will be an underpainting of sort. It will be an underpainting. It'll be the lightest area, and then I'll start to just form some of the shapes by working what we call working behind, and I'll explain that when I get to that. It's still of a dampness that I can put thicker paint. You'll notice that my paint's getting thicker. If I went in there with a mixture of pigment with a lot of water at that stage, it would just blossom on me. It would just push back all the paint on the surface, and that's not what I want. Okay, I'm finishing up this area, and basically, like I said, this is the underpainting of this marsh scene. I'll be going darker on top of this to get the value deeper. And now I'm doing the reflections, and I want to be sure to get that reflection of the dark value underneath there. So right now I'm pre-wetting the middle background area so that I can go back in there, because I'm realizing that it started to really dry light, and watercolor does dry lighter. And so I really need to go back, and it dried. You have to wait till that area is totally dry. And I'm putting a darker value on top. And it's mostly like a transparent, not a heavy, opaque painting. It's not thick painting on top of this, because I want that underpainting to show through, the one I did a little bit ago. Watching the edges of my foliage, so I really don't overpower them or take them out, because I like the light in them to show through. Here I'm taking darker colors. I usually make my darks with a combination, a few different things. It'll be sometimes ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, which is down in the bottom, the last color coming down the left-hand side of the paints. Next, right there, I was touching it with by Payne's Gray. I'll use that pretty strong with the ultramarine blue. Sometimes I use the Payne's Gray and the gold and a little bit of the blue, ultramarine blue, to make darks. I just vary it a little bit. I wanted to make sure I captured a little bit of the land by the edge of the water right here. So I'm preparing a kind of an orangey mixture so that I can go back later and drop some darker tones on it, but I want to keep some of that muddy kind of land there. Right here, I wanted to be sure not to be boring and have that middle section where the marsh meets the water come all the way across in the same way. I'm trying to change up that area coming across so it's not boring. Really important rule of composition that I learned is that make no two intervals the same, meaning that change up. If you're getting things that are getting very monotonous and boring, do something different. For example, right here I have a lot of blue, and so now I'm coming in, and it's a light middle value, so I'm hitting it with some darks, and if I find that it's getting too much the same, I'll charge a little strong color into it to make it more exciting. All of this area going as a reflection into the water has to have a soft edge, and that from that point we know what it is. It's a reflection. It's not the actual real bush foliage. As I said, the edge tells a story, so right now I'm giving a little bit more attention to the edge of the shape. If it's a reflection, it has to be soft, and it has to feel like it's sitting on the surface of reflecting on the surface of the water. I want some vertical action, but I also want some horizontal too, across the surface of the water. Now, this is the area that's most challenging, is the top of the weed area there. So as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, well, how am I going to handle this? Because Every time in every painting, there's some area that's a challenge to you, and you're not sure exactly how to handle it. So this is my challenging area. And I'm trying to decide whether I want to leave the tops. And I check to see whether it's wet. What's the wetness of the area above that? If it's still wet, then I may have to stop and dry it. And I don't want to go in there at the wrong time of wetness. And this takes experience of, checking and making mistakes. A lot of my success has come from making a lot of mistakes. Here I'm using a flat brush just to show you the advantage of having a flat brush, especially if you're trying to do any kind of straight, angular kind of work. But most of the time, I prefer to go back to my round brush. So here, I felt that area above the weeds there on the left, trying to decide, and I said, nope, it's too wet. So now I'm going over to the other side and try to make a little bit of definition on this area. Now, this is just helping me. This is what we call painting negative painting. This is painting behind a shape. That shape that I have my little finger resting on is light compared to the rest of this grouping. So I'm painting behind to form the edge of that light group. It will not stay that light, but at this point I'm trying to separate it from the weeds on the top. Notice I keep on cleaning my palette. It's little, and now here I'm going in and I'm trying to warm it up a little bit and take down the value in that front little area that I just described by painting behind it. I didn't want it to be really bright because, like I said, my whole intention is to put this marsh as a medium to medium dark value against the beautiful water and the sky. So here now I'm going to pay a little more attention to the edge and the shape of underneath these weeds. And I want to vary the edge at the bottom here, so you'll see that I'm getting the edge down, but in a little bit I'm going to show you how I'm going to try to lift some things and make it a little bit more interesting without taking away from the rest of the painting though. I could really stop at this stage, and sometimes I do overwork areas, but I'm having so much fun here that I don't want to stop. So here I'm taking a little palette knife, and you've got to get it at the right time. It has to be a certain wetness to be able to pull and get to the white. I decided to try and use my pencil to help form the edge, and I said, no, that's not going to work. So I'm just being bold, and I'm going to form my green from that Payne's gray and that gold, and a little bit of burnt sienna, and some ultramarine blue there. Get those all ready for and a little bit of permanent alizarin crimson. And I'm going to try to work right along the top. Well, first of all, I'm making the edge of the back behind there, that marsh behind these weeds. I'm just trying to have them come through in a way through those and be behind the bush. This is hard. This takes a little bit of patience and time. But I know I have to get dark to feel. You see, now it's starting to say this is in front and that's in back. However, I do want an overlap feeling where some of those weeds are going to hide that background edge of that marsh. And you'll see how I handle that in a little bit. But right now I'm just trying to, work that so it looks okay behind the front weeds. I'm trying to lay in some horizontal feel to the shadows in the back. I'm getting close here. to finishing, but these are just the little finishing touches, which I love. It's the detail that I can get excited, but I can't overdo it too. So I'm trying to actually even put some little weed silhouettes on the reflection in the surface. Now here I will have my Kleenex handy, because what I'm doing is I'm taking and softening with a wet brush. Well, actually, I'm putting water on the surface of a dark area, and then I'm taking the Kleenex and I'm pressing it to pull out some of the weed look. Not a lot. I don't want to overdo this. However, it is hard on your brush. So right now I'm not scrubbing with my good brush. I'm just kind of applying a line of water and then pulling it up. And if I need to pull out any more, you see there, I take an old brush if I want to soften, old flat brush, and use that because I don't want to ruin my brushes. And here I'm actually scrubbing a little bit to get a feel of some of the fern there coming over and curling out. Just makes it more interesting. Now I'm putting in some reflections of the light on the surface of the reflection down at the bottom by pulling out. I put wet water and then in a horizontal form, and then just rub it with my Kleenex. If you squint your eyes, you're still seeing that bottom foliage area there as a shape. And that's what I want. Even with the reflection, I want it to look like a shape. I'm simplifying. I don't want to make a piecemeal of each little piece. And notice I'm putting in some warmth, some red and orange, just to give it a little bit more vitality. Things can get too green on you and boring. I love the chisel edge of a flat brush sometimes. You can make shapes that are different. And that's what I want. I want my marks to vary and not be the same everywhere. This finishing time can take anywhere from a few minutes to a lifetime. I mean, I've taken paintings and put them away because I just said, oh, I was finished them, and then I pull them out and go, oh no, I know what to do now. I can. Or maybe it wasn't working and I put away, and then when I pull it out, I go, oh, I can finish this. I know what to do now. I love that. But I do love the finishing stage. But you can't rush it. Now here I'm going to go and pull out carefully with my good brush, so I really need to be very mindful of not ruining that tip. This is dangerous. And I think I said, oh, I better be careful. So I don't want to overdo it. Checking the temperature of there's a feel to know whether it's still damp, and if it is, and you want to get in there, you really have to go with thick paint. Just want to get a little variety in here. And sometimes I use my finger to smudge to lose an edge. Now, behind these weeds on the right, that's what my next challenge will be. So here I'm preparing that. And I know it has to be darker. So, but I wanted to not look like it's just a big blob of dark blue-green put behind there. So I have to be careful that when I do put that behind there, it identifies some of the edge of the weed, but it goes with the marsh. So here I am trying to connect that shape in a realistic way to say, oh, okay, this is part of the marsh where it kind of gets darker and changes, and I'm softening the edge, the bottom edge, so it, and sometimes the top, so it kind of just meshes in there, but doesn't look like it's painted on top. Little red in it. Sometimes if it gets too green, I go, oh, that's boring, let's put some red in it. I'm noticing that I have to get in there with that between these weeds a little bit more, and where this area of the edge of the marsh, as it meets the water, it needs to be darkened. And here, I could go straight across, and that would be so boring, so I decided to make it a little bit different right here and smudge it with my finger and just look, you have these areas of the marsh where the grassy part stops. And look how I use my brush in a variety of different ways just to give a different mark, flicking it up. That's fun. Getting close here, and this is just the final little making sure everything kind of sings. And this is a good time too, which I couldn't in this painting of this right now, is to get away from it. Put the painting at least about 6 feet away, and if you can get it in a vertical position, and look at it from about 6 feet away, and you'll get a really different perspective, and that's really good. And I'll find things then. Often I'll even paint this last stage with the painting in a vertical position. I love to do that because I can move my chair back and view it and get a better perspective then too. This is the time too, see how my hand is right over the water. If you would take a piece of paper, that might be smart. I have stuck my hand in paint and accidentally put it in areas that were all finished, and I went, oh no. So, but this all comes from that happening. Here I am deciding that white area of that pond back there just really needs a little bit of reflecting the surface of the sky. And I noticed that if I put that kind of an orangey tone in there, my eye travels down over the marsh. So I decided to just let that glow of that orange come through. I pre-wet it and then put some of that yellow, which was the yellow ochre, and the permanent alizarin on top of it. Now I'm just kind of softening some edges of things that are just standing out to me. Oh no, I also put a little blue in there from the sky being reflected onto the surface of the pool. Here I'm just softening some areas that are screaming out to me I'm too hard edged, or it attracts my attention too much. Now I'm wetting the surface of the reflection and pulling out some of the that horizontal light that goes across on the surface of the water, softening some edges that seem to be too hard. All finishing work. I'm using an old brush here that is a synthetic, and it can take being roughed up a little bit. Here I'm just kind of putting a little bit of the light blue coming across, so it'll look like it's the surface of the water, not everything all vertically coming down. I could even have gone darker, and eventually I may take this painting and even get this a little bit darker in this front area of these lines of color, shapes of ripples coming across the whole surface there. Okay, this is my old brush that I'm just trying to get those horizontal kind of reflections coming in there. See how it really lends itself to the look of water there. Certain things that I've learned over the years. Now I am finished, and I am so ready to take this tape off, and you see how it makes a nice pretty boundary or border. And thank you for watching me, and here are the rest of the supply list, and I hope you've enjoyed watching my video. Stay safe.